Hi, my name is Nikki, and this is The Interventionalist. Hi. I have not made a video in so long. I think the last video I made was like in March or April, and I've restarted this like 10 times because for some reason I'm really struggling to start it. So I'm just going to say immediately what I want to talk about, which is relearning and rediscovering who you are after abuse or after an abusive relationship, and then also navigating healthy relationships or navigating a relationship after an abusive relationship or after abuse. And the last video I made was actually kind of talking about that. I was talking about being in love after abuse and being in a healthy relationship after an abusive relationship. And since then, I'm in a very different life situation, which is that I'm no longer in that relationship. It ended, and it ended just about as badly as it could. She cheated on me, and my life is very, very different than it was. But I do still remember that relationship in some ways fondly, and I do think that there's aspects of it that have impacted me in a healthy way, despite the fact that I've learned since then that um, the relationship might not have ever been healthy the way that I thought it was. I mean, she cheated on me, and just to like give a recap, we were together, and then she really encouraged me to move in with her, and like that was my own volition, but she really encouraged me, and then we moved in together, and 2 weeks later, I found out she had been cheating on me for months, like when we were signing the lease, and then she got really, really cruel and mean, and then she just moved out. We moved in together. She moved out, so now I'm stuck here by myself. And she left all of her stuff, which put me in a terrible position. And then I also found out that she is actually lying about some really serious health stuff that put me at risk for the entire relationship. Um, Anyways, so the point is, my life is so different than it was when I filmed that last video. And I truly believed I was in a healthy, loving relationship. And the really confusing thing is that in some ways it was, because even if it was coming from an unhealthy or maybe not the person that I thought it was dishonest, it still was being projected in a way that I was receiving as like honest, or I believed to be, and it was having a healthy effect on me. So when I talk about it in this video, I'm gonna refer to it as like the healthy relationship, but in reality, like we both know, obviously that wasn't like it might not be totally the case, but I'm gonna refer to it that way. And then the other relationship is my abusive relationship from a couple years ago. But anyways, so I want to talk about those two topics because I had a couple people reach out and ask me both those questions. And when I read them, I was like, okay, these go together in my head in a way that I never realized before, which is that not only did I have to refigure out who I was after an abusive relationship, but I had to refigure out who I was in a relationship after an abusive relationship. And I usually used to say, so like since my relationship just ended, that was a couple months ago, I started making TikTok videos, and it's been crazy to have people like listen to the things I have to say, and also reach out to me and share experiences of their own. And crazy, it's like the biggest, I swear it's like the biggest honor. I can't think of another word. And also send me questions, which is why I'm making this based on these questions. But yeah, so I just want to say that's where the questions came from. And I wanted to talk about those on here because I think that I could talk about them for a lot longer than like 10 minutes. But so I'm just gonna talk about it because if not, I'm gonna have to restart this and I'm gonna confuse myself because I've had to restart this like 10 times. So figuring out who you are after an abusive relationship. This was something that when I look back now, I guess I didn't realize like how much it affected me, but I can like pinpoint very specific moments in time leading up to like my next relationship where I like broke down because I did not know who I was anymore. And I think something that happened right after I got out of an abusive relationship was feeling like, or knowing that all that I had been and all of who I was gone. Like she did not exist anymore. Even if there were still parts of me, core aspects that were fundamental to who I was and who I still am, I had no connection to them anymore because I had been so beaten down and broken down and dysregulated and disoriented that any parts of me that did still exist, like fundamental to who I was, like maybe like my empathy and like stuff like that, I had no connection to. So they might as well have not existed. Let alone just like who I was as a person in my everyday life and the way that I behaved and the things I liked and I didn't like. I had become so broken down and dysregulated that I had no idea who I was. And that was really scary. And it also made me very angry. When I look back at old journals after that time, like I have one that I was just reading earlier, and I talk about how it freaked me out and I hated it. And I was very angry at the fact that I no longer was the girl that I was, but then also being angry at that girl and hating her because I blamed who I was for letting myself get into that relationship. It was just a very confusing time. All I knew is that I suddenly felt like I was a completely different person and I didn't know who that person was and I hated that. and I did not like it, and I did not like the person that I now was, because this is also something that was mentioned in the message. I had been in a relationship with an abusive person who was telling me who I was. And something abusive people will do, which in the message I got says this, is they will try and tell you who you are, but they will always do it in a way that makes you feel terrible, which means they're always going to make you feel like a terrible person. And something that abusive people will do that I've realized is they will take everything that you do and try and spin it into like accusing you of being an abusive, mean person to make you feel like you're the bad guy in the relationship, essentially, while they're abusing you. But also, I guess like the thing I'm thinking of is, I made a video about this the other day, is like they will take your reactive abuse and then they will tell you that because you're reacting to their abuse, that you are the abusive one. And that can be so confusing, because like who you become and in an abusive relationship, like, is not who you are. Like, it is really just like a representation of your one, of being conditioned by an abusive person. You are not your conditioning by an abusive person. But it can start to feel that way, that you don't know if that is who you are or if that's not who you are, but you hate who that person is because you're being conditioned by an abusive person. So of course you're not going to like feel good in who you are in that moment. And also because you're then responding out of just like a root core drive, intrinsic drive to survive. And so you're feeling like a sense of being out of control, and that might have you acting in a way that like you at other points in your life might never. And that's the thing. There's a reason that like reactive abuse is a term that exists, is because you might react in a way that like from the outside looking in, if somebody doesn't know what you're reacting to, they might call you abusive. And you might call that abusive. But in reality, like, you are just reacting to abuse. You're just trying to survive. Of course, it is never going to look pretty. Sometimes it's going to be very loud. You're just trying to survive. But the thing is, like, looking back and remembering those moments, and then remembering somebody using them to define you and then accuse you of being a certain way, or accuse you of being like abusive yourself, or being a mean, awful person. It's just one of the many ways that abusive people will try and control you. And sometimes it's not even like they're not even taking your actions like reactive abuse. They're just going to take whatever they can to try and make you feel inferior to them by making you feel like you're a bad person. So in the message I got, it was like telling this person that like they were really mean. They're a really mean, awful person. And are they? No. But of course that's going to like stick with somebody. And when you're already having your identity stripped from you, you're going to start to wonder if maybe that really is your identity. And it can be really easy to have a self-fulfilling prophecy when somebody tells you who you are, to start to kind of inhabit that identity, because you don't know who you are anymore, and you're being pushed and pushed and pushed. I think people do that with kids a lot, where they like ascribe personalities to children and they become like self-fulfilling prophecies. But anyways, that's not the point. The point is that like you can lose a complete sense of self. And for me, like, I remember feeling like everything that I was gone, and I had no idea who that was. And I felt like a blank canvas, but not in a good way. Like, I felt like everything that had been ripped away from me. I had no access to it anymore. And it wasn't even like a puzzle on the ground to be put back together. Like, it was sand. Like, I could not, there was no pictures to try and look at to try and piece together who I used to be. Like, it was all gone. This is my cat, Ashley. And that was really scary. And that gave me a lot of fear going forward in my life. But also that left me with like all of this abusive person's words that were like telling me who I was as a person, felt like the only thing I had to refer to try and understand who I was as a person now, because that was the last person who like made me believe that they knew me better than anyone and that they knew me so intimately. So all these things that they said must be true. And suddenly I had no sense of an identity, because I'd been so broken down that I was like, well, I don't know, like, maybe it's true. Maybe I should believe them. And it's just a terrible fucking position to be in. And I remember just like telling my therapist that I had no idea who I was anymore, and I worried that I was an awful, terrible person, and I didn't know what I liked anymore or what I didn't like, because that's something else I was in that message, is not knowing the things you like or you don't like anymore, because your abuser is telling you those things, or because you're trying to protect yourself, you're trying to appease them. That means disagreeing with them as little as possible. That means liking all the things that they like and disliking all the things that they dislike, to try and not become a target, to try and not make them angrier. And like, suddenly, who are you then? Like, you no longer remember the things you actually like or don't like. And usually when you're that dysregulated, like, your ability to feel like or dislike for things, like, actually, like, everyday things in life, like, is pretty distorted. Like, your body is just in survival mode, so like your ability to feel like excited to go paint or something like that is usually not going to come through. And then it's just more confusing about no longer knowing who you are, or who you're not. But it's just having your identity ascribed to while you're in an abusive relationship, and then getting out of that abusive situation and having to unascribe that identity and realize that it was just conditioning, even if some of what they said you seem to have represented. Um, but realizing that's a representation of abusive conditioning, and then trying to refigure out who you are. And um, it's hard when I look back, because that's why I really associated that question with navigating a healthy relationship afterwards. And it's because one of the first things that comes to mind, and this is going to be like a little rated R, but the first time that I was with someone after that abusive relationship, I already had lost a sense of self and I was already confused about a lot of things. But the first time I was with someone after that, in like a rated R way, I should not have done. It was like 5 or 6 months out of that relationship, and I was just trying to date again. And my bipolar meds, like I hadn't gotten the right prescription yet, so I was still pretty manic. And I was like, no, like I just need to push myself through it and like have this experience that, like, it was like I kind of felt like I knew this was going to be really traumatizing and freak me out, but I was like, you just have to get through it. And then, like, you know what I mean? Like that approach, which is never actually usually helpful, like exposure therapy, I guess. And it was not a good idea. But the next day after that, I this girl asked me something, and it was essentially like, what do you like? Like, what do you like? And I was like, what? And she was like, because you literally just like didn't want anything. You were just like, hey, time for bed. Like, and I was like, and for some reason, my whole brain just like short circuited, and I had no answer. I had no clue what I liked. And it's because one of the things, like in my abusive relationship, was being used that way, like being like a doormat for someone, but not only like knowing that, but being told that vocally over and over and over again, that I was just like a doormat for someone in that way. And that it had nothing to do with me, that like intimacy like that, like I was not actually a part of. Like I was just the thing like being used. Like that was what she would say over and over again. And she really like, because she was physically abusive, and then she was like using certain kind of rhetoric, like she made me believe, or she would try and really force me to believe that I liked that, or that I should enjoy that. Like the way she kind of would, it was like grooming. She tried to make me believe that because she liked it, if I was a good partner, I would like it because she liked it, which was just like brutal, brutally using somebody. And I remember I was like, I was stunned, because it hadn't even occurred to me that I could be an active participant in this kind of situation again. I had no idea that that was something that I could be anymore. Like, I don't know, it like didn't even occur to me. And it also felt like I was just like then operating out of this conditioning, and that really scared me. And it really scared me that I had no answer. Because then I was like, who the fuck am I, first of all? And what do I like? Like, I have no idea who I am anymore. And that was just one of the ways. And that was one of the ways in which, like, being a partner to someone, I suddenly had to relearn who I was in a relationship, and being an active participant in the relationship, with having needs and like wants of my own, because I was like conditioned to believe that I should have nothing, have no needs or wants of my own, because like I should be happy just being used by this person because that's what makes her happy. That's what she would say, you know? And it was my birthday too. It was my birthday now, almost a couple of years ago. I was turning 23. It happened on my birthday. And then I just like spent the rest of the day sobbing because I was so confused and I was so upset. And I was like, I just didn't know what was going to come next in my life, because I had no idea who I was. And I didn't realize the extent to which I lost a sense of self and identity, and also a sense of self-worth, and a right to have a sense of like self, if that makes sense. Because having a sense of self in my case, like, was not what she wanted. And she sort of beat that out of me to just be whatever she wanted. So like I wasn't supposed to be like an person with agency, and an individual with like wants or needs or likes or dislikes. Like I should just be what she wanted, and I should be happy with that. And it really like conditioned me to believe that in a relationship, maybe that was the thing that made me happy. And having somebody ask me that um, sort of like broke me out of, I guess, like a spell that came from that conditioning, and that was really jarring to me. But I think it was after that situation that I really started to realize I had to refigure out who I was as a person. And I remember talking about it in therapy all of the time after that, and also being very afraid that because I didn't know who I was anymore, that I was just going to become whatever the next person told me I was. Um, and that scared me, because I'd been with someone who told me really negative things about myself. And so I worried that if somebody did that to me again, that I would just believe them immediately, and I would have no like armor. That, I guess, is kind of what it is. I felt like I had no armor when it came to building myself up again. Like I was worried that somebody at any given point in time could break it down. or start to paint the canvas themselves because I didn't have like a shield up or like a guard because I hadn't had time to like build it yet, and I didn't have a sense of self to really build and defend yet. And that freaked me out because I didn't know who the hell I was. And you need to know who you are. That's like truly how you protect yourself, is like coming to really know who you are. And I just went to therapy all the time, and I ended up deciding like I wasn't even gonna go on like a single date until I like really had that kind of figured out. And I spent a whole year not going on a single date. I didn't go on dating apps. I didn't like try and entertain any kind of dating. And I spent a lot of time alone, which is really hard after I think being in an abusive setting, because the last thing you want to be is alone. I think sometimes you want to be completely alone, but at the same time, like there's a sense of being terrified with being alone. It's a very confusing situation to be in. I mean, I was already an introvert, so then I was just like super isolated, and I honestly isolated myself to a pretty significant degree. And I started. Sounds weird, but one of the things that I did was, I don't remember what book I read that kind of like sparked this. But I started remembering all the things that I loved the most when I was a kid, when I was a little kid. This was something one of my close friends said to me recently too, which was like, who were you as a kid? I think that's a good guidebook for like trying to figure out the things that you truly do really love in life versus the things you've been conditioned to believe that you should want or love, right? And maybe like socialization and that conditioning can be a little bit akin to like the conditioning that can come from an abusive situation, like trying to define who you are and your identity, and unlearning it. And part of unlearning something can be like your socialization. And so I remember trying to remember who I was as a kid, like as far back as I could, like the kind of person I was and the things that I liked the most and the things that I didn't like, because that was like the closest I had to myself, unfiltered from pain and abuse, and from the conditioning of abuse or fear, was me as a child. And like I didn't have a great childhood, but that was the closest I got, you know. And there was other things that affected that, but that was the closest I got. And so I just tried to remember the things that I loved as a child and the things that made me the happiest as a kid. And that's actually why, like, what led me to start this originally was just a website, The Interventionalist. And it's because the thing that I loved the most as a child was writing. I used to write all the time as a kid. It was like my favorite thing to do is to write little stories. And I liked to talk. Like those were the two things I really loved as a kid, was talking. I was like always sent to the principal's office for talking in class. And then I would also write all the time. I'd get in trouble for, instead of listening to like my teacher, writing, and I would write little stories and I would read. Those were the things I really loved as a kid. And also sports. I really loved sports as a kid, but those were the things I really loved. And so that's actually why I started this. And I started this in like, I started this in like June of 2023, and I like decided I was going to start doing it in like May. And I started like really making the effort to try and figure out who I was again around January of 2023. And I started this in about May because I had spent those months like trying to remember who I was as a person, but also trying to like calm down my nervous system enough to like be able to like at least look at things in my life neutrally again. Because when you're so conditioned to feel certain ways about things and you're already so dysregulated, your ability to look at things in your life and look at things you used to like or you might like or things you don't like, or it's kind of impossible because you're all over the place. Like you're not only being affected by that conditioning, but you're also emotionally all over the place. So that the ability to think clearly and like focus on something and determine how you feel about it, like you really need to like be able to think about it without being overcome with that conditioning and also that dysregulation of emotions. And so I spent a few months just trying to like get to that point. So I think if you can get to a point where like you feel like you're calmed down enough, it's after that that like you can start to try and look at the things in your life that you might love or that you used to love a lot and try them again, while like you can actually start to be in the moment and feel them, because your body is not in fight or flight when you can't feel anything other than like fear or fight or flight. Like you need to be calmed down to really feel the experience of something, and then if you can feel the experience of something, you can determine how you actually feel about it. And the thing that I went back to after doing that, I tried doing yoga for a long time to try and like calm myself down. If I'm being honest, the only way that I think I really ended up calming myself down was medication. I'm bipolar 2, and I was really manic after that breakup. And in January, I got the right medication, and then around like March, I had finally like settled down, and I was no longer manic, and then I could start to like calm down enough to like get to a point where I could focus. And around May, I was able to do that, and I realized like the thing that I really loved was writing, and so I started reading a shit ton, reading and writing. So I started reading a shit ton. I was going to the library all the time. I was getting all these different kind of books, and I was just reading and reading and reading. And I remembered how much I loved it. And it's not that I was being told I didn't like that in that relationship. Like in the message I got, it was like being told things you like or don't like. In that situation, I wasn't being told that I don't like those things. Kind of like I was being conditioned to believe I don't like being like an active participant in the relationship. But I wasn't being told I don't like reading or writing. It was more so that I had just had everything that I was stripped from me, and I no longer knew if I even liked those things. And then I was able to like do it again, and I loved them again. I loved reading again. Suddenly, like there was a piece of myself I had back, you know, and it was different because I was different and I was a different person, and the kind of books I wanted to read were different now. But it was back. Like I had something that I loved back, and even if it looked a little bit different, I loved it. Like I loved it, and like looking at who I was before, like back to when I was a child, I was able to find and like hold on to something, like grasp onto an idea of a thing that I might like, and like re-experience it, and realize the ways in which I still like it or love it. And it didn't look exactly the same as it did like when I was a child. This thing that I was now grasping onto to just hope that it had something in it that I could feel connection to. There was still something there that I loved, and that was reading. And then I started writing again, and this is my cat, Teeny Mean. And then I started writing again, and that was really hard for me because something about like if you're someone who has experienced abuse or abusive relationships and you like to create things, like you like creativity, like painting or drawing or photography, writing. Creative pursuits are often a lot of ways that we can project our pain into the real world and onto something else, and heal from it, and also look at it in front of us, right? Like we take our deepest emotions and experiences, and we'll use them to create any form of art, whatever medium. And when you've suffered from like abuse or abusive situations, if you like creative pursuits, I think your love for creativity is something in particular that will be stolen from you, at least for a while, because of the way that it like tends to cause you to have to experience or re-experience some of your deepest, most painful emotions, because that creativity tends to project those things out. That's what we use is our emotions. And when you've been through a lot of pain, you have a lot of pent up painful emotions. I mean, creativity is a way to like open up that door and like let it flood out. So you might hate it. And so I tried writing again and I hated it, but I kept doing it. But I hated it because it hurt. Every time I tried to write, oh my God, it hurt so bad. I was crying all the fucking time. And just writing in itself would make me angry because I knew it was going to make me hurt. But it was also the thing that I loved the most as a kid. And even before I got into that relationship, something that I really loved and I always gravitated towards. But now it was something that really hurt. And I had to try and figure out if it hurt because I didn't like it anymore, or if it just hurt because the things that like were going to come out when I did it, at least for the time being. And I decided I was going to stick to it because even though it still hurt, it was still the thing that like was always in the back of my mind that I wish I was doing, or that I used to do, or that I knew at the very least I used to love, you know, even though I felt differently about it now. I knew I used to love it, and I had nothing else to like go off of at this point. I didn't know what I loved because everything had been taken from me. I didn't have a sense of self. I had no connection to myself in a way that felt like I could connect to the things around me. If you don't feel connected to yourself because you're so dysregulated, the last thing you're going to be able to do is feel connected to things around you. And so I was just like basing this off the idea that like at one point I knew I can intellectually, logically recall when I felt a connection to it, and maybe eventually I'll feel connected to it again. And I didn't feel connected to anything else. So I just kept sticking to it and writing and writing. And then eventually I was like, I like this again. Like once I started to, I think, write through so much of those waves of pain that they had been projected out enough that they weren't overwhelming me anymore, I started to just genuinely really enjoy it. And then it felt like another part of myself that I had back. And I feel like with each little thing, no matter how little it is that you can find that you like genuinely from your core, you feel connected to and do you like, is like one step closer, like to feeling like you have a sense of self again, or feeling like you have an identity, because it spreads. No matter how little the thing is that like you now can use to describe yourself, you can say, I like this, or I don't like this, or I'm this, or I'm not this. No matter how little it feels, like if it's just like you like writing a little bit or painting, or it's huge. It's huge when you feel like you've completely lost a sense of self and a sense of your identity. That spreads, and it will have a ripple effect, and like it will help you understand and define so many other aspects of who you are. And so cling to it, hold on to it, no matter how small the thing is that you can like look back right now or recall and be like, I like that. I know that I like that, or I love that, or I don't like that. Hold on to it. So that tells you something about yourself. And I feel like if you hold on to that and you let it grow and you like really look at it and like hone in on that thing, no matter how small it is, like it'll help you if it's like watercolor and there's like a dot of water and you have like a pink color and you can put the pink on it and it's like, okay, like suddenly I have one color, one thing that I like, but it's like watercolor, so it tends to spread and like bleed across the paper. It's kind of like that in my head. Like it'll start to bleed and like all of your blood will start to like make more sense to you and it'll become something. If like the inside of you is watercolor, each little thing will cause it to spread more and more until you're filled up with a better understanding of yourself. So you're like filled head to toe with like blood that you understand, that you feel like defines you, and you know that it defines you for who you are. And I feel like being able to understand yourself is so vital to feeling safe, because if you don't know who you are, you feel very unsafe and you feel very vulnerable. I think I said that in the beginning of this. And so not only is it like essential to like going through life and being able to enjoy it, to feel connected, to not feel like your head is in the clouds in the worst possible way because you have no sense of self anymore. And the sense of self that you've often been ascribed by an abusive person just hurts, and makes the world scary because it can make you feel like you're unlovable or an awful person that nobody should love. Um, it just, having any sense of self at that point, no matter how small it is, can mean everything. And yeah, I guess it's like, I don't even know if that's really totally helpful, other than all that I had to really help me figure it out were the things that I could look back on before that relationship or before that experience as far as I could. And that was my childhood and things that once made me light up and once made me happy, and in the hope that maybe they would too, or at least would start to guide me in some kind of direction. And I think something really important too, after like getting out of an abusive situation, like once you can sort of calm down or regulate a bit more, is pushing yourself to experience new things, because it is through new experiences that we come to understand the experiences that we want or we don't want. But again, I feel like it's so important to like give yourself the time to feel calm down and regulated, so that you can actually be present in a moment and experience the feelings authentically, and not just experience them through the lens of your abuse and your trauma and that like very present dysregulation, of being in fight or flight. Like you need to be able to experience it clearly. But once you're able to do that, I think you should throw yourself into whatever experience you can. Like even if it's just going on walks and like interacting with more people or people watching, any kind of little experience, like every little experience that you have building up day by day by day gives you a vault of experiences to like look back on and start to like paint a picture of who you are. Because every little experience you have tells you something about yourself, because it causes you to reflect on who you are. Like I made a video talking about this the other day, but every interaction you have with another person like imposes some kind of self introspection, or self reflection. And it's because when you look at another person, or you're having an experience, but particularly with people, um, you have to you have to you are going to respond to it no matter what. Like you're always going to respond to it, and that tells you something about yourself. And especially interacting with people, because like if a person is different from you in any capacity, like you clock it because you're like noticing your differences, and that also will cause you to like alter your behavior to try and like match this interaction, to like make it an agreeable interaction, or to try and understand if you're compatible or not compatible. And like even just being able to determine if you think you're compatible with another person, like this is why I think it's important to like interact with more people even after abuse, is like another way to like understand who you are, by trying to understand compatibility, or like taking what you can learn from the moments where you feel incompatible with someone or compatible with someone, can like, I think you can help deconstruct, like understand a bit more of who you are. But again, like all of that comes from, I think that follows with like starting to feel a sense of self in some respect or some regard. um so like, because I think interacting with people for me was really scary at first, doing things like that as a way to try and understand myself further until I had a sense of self. Because if not, I really was terrified I was just going to become whatever they told me I was, or whatever they wanted me to be, because I had no sense of self. I was a blank canvas in the worst way possible, and that scared me. So I do think that's why I mean, or what I mean by like, you protect yourself through knowing yourself, and to be known is to be loved. And so if you know yourself, you'll love yourself. And I swear, if you do not like yourself, it's because you do not know yourself. If you know yourself, you will love yourself, because you're a very lovable person, deserving of love. And so I think that's why it's important to try and regulate. And if you can regulate, throw yourself into any tiny little pursuit that you have even like the tiniest inkling you might like or you might not like. Do it even if you think you don't like it. See how much you still don't like it. Maybe you will like it. But all of those things will tell you something about yourself, and they'll give something back to you. And just indulging in something in general gives you something back of yourself, gives you a bit of yourself back to you, um, because you're engaging with who you are, and that will always come through and helping you understand who you are, because you're actively engaging with who you are to try and like experience something. And anytime you experience anything, you're also experiencing it yourself. What's that like quote? It's like you're the world experiencing itself over and over again. I think when you experience the world, you're also experiencing yourself, because every interaction you have, like every experience you have, like causes an internal experience for you. And that will always tell you something about yourself. I think it's important to study your reactions to things. Like when you get to know yourself, relearning who you are. I think something really important is like taking a moment. It's like that's it is, I guess, what self reflection is and like self awareness, but studying your reactions, like taking a moment to be like, really take note of that specific sensation, that whatever just like came up inside of you when you experience something, and you might not know how to define it. Maybe you don't know if it's a good or a bad sensation anymore because you've been so dysregulated, but note that you had it. Just note that you had it, and then like store that and remember that in that moment experiencing that thing you had this reaction, and then when time comes you'll be able to define it, and maybe you'll figure out that's the kind of feeling it is when you like something, or maybe it was just fear and confusion, or maybe it was you didn't like it. Like there's so many ways that you'll be able to come to understand your emotions once you're able to like be further and further away from an abusive situation, and also like as you become more and more regulated, I think you'll be better able to understand the sensations in your body, and I think they'll also be eventually less and less influenced are coming through the lens of abuse and trauma, so they'll start to feel like more like authentic sensations, and not just sensations that are a result of are being muddled with the sensations that are left over from abuse and trauma. But I think taking note of all of your reactions to things is really helpful to help you figure out who you are as a person. Because why do you react that way? You know, I guess that's how you develop like self-awareness. Why are you reacting that way? Why is your body feeling that way when you do this thing? Why is it not feeling that way when you do this thing and it used to feel that way? Like even just asking yourself like why suddenly you feel like you don't like something is a way to try and understand yourself and engage in like a sense of self-awareness that I think can mean everything when you feel like you have no sense of self anymore. And I just remember how terrifying it was, like how scary it was to feel like I had no idea who I was, and for so many different reasons. And I guess yeah, what did I say at the beginning of this? What was like going to talk about like the idea of a healthy relationship. Actually I feel like I'm going to make another video talking about that, but I guess like in particular the idea of like refiguring out who you are as a partner, um, that was a very different kind of refiguring out who I was, and I guess I already kind of touched on it, but I had to like engage in relationship experiences, even the one that I mentioned at the beginning of this. I was a bit rated R, that like caused me pretty significant pain. I don't regret it, and like she was a nice girl. I don't regret it because it told me something about myself, um, and it wasn't something I wanted to see or I wanted to know, and it told me something that was painful and I don't think defined me, but it told me ways in which I was broken still, and the ways in which I had lost a sense of self. And it was through every single little relationship interaction that I had and that I have had that I've been able to understand who I am in relationships and the things that I want in relationships. But it like only came as a result of me throwing myself into relationship experiences. And I feel like so much of refiguring out who you are is just committing to throwing yourself into as many experiences as humanly possible. Um, and that can be really scary when those experiences might be reminiscent of your trauma. Like for me, relationships, intimate moments, like I mentioned, um, that's really terrifying to throw yourself into experiences like that. Like you really have to like get to a point where they're not going to overwhelm you. You know, like I don't think there's benefits to exposure therapy, but if something's going to overwhelm you to the point that you can't function, like that's different. But if you feel like you can like start to like regulate yourself enough that even if it's going to cause some dysregulation because it's a new experience that is for the first time going to cause you to confront maybe some emotions from the past or your trauma, I think it's important to start confronting them in doses when you can, microdose that sort of confrontation of those experiences or those emotions, so that you can start to slowly and not overwhelm yourself all at once, like understand yourself a bit better and like pick up on your reactions to things, and like that tells you things you might not like or you do like. And for me in relationships, like that meant throwing myself into relationship experiences, and when I got into a new relationship I was thrown into a lot of relationship experiences that I hadn't had since the last one. And that caused me to learn a lot about who I was, but it also forced me, if I wanted to be a good partner, to figure out who I was as a partner. Because if not, I was just going to be someone's doormat again, and not even because I necessarily wanted to be. It was because I didn't know anything about myself in a relationship, so I didn't want to ask for anything because I didn't know what I wanted. And I also had to work through the trauma of like feeling like I didn't deserve to be like an equal participant in this relationship, but I couldn't really be because I didn't know who I was. And so it took like just experience, like letting myself experience those things again to start to figure out who I was, by experiencing them again, I guess is like the only way I can really put it, even though it was incredibly painful. I mean, that like really sent me into a spiral, like having those experiences again. I really did lose my mind for a bit. I had really major PTSD. And in some ways, like, I think that was like bound to happen. And in others, it was just unfortunate. Like, I just was hit with such intense PTSD. But even then, like, with that PTSD, it helped me. It finally, like, lifted, I think, the clouds. I think it kind of, like, made everything inside of me a little less blurry because with each, like, PTSD episode, like, it was wiping away a little bit more of that, like, blur so that I could see the picture behind it. But there was so much pain that was covering that picture that like would describe who I am as a person and my identity. That like I had to have these experiences that like brought up a lot of emotions and feelings to wipe that like mirror clean or that like window clean with the picture behind it that would like describe who I am. I had to like sift through all that pain and those experiences and let them come out of me, which for me was like really major PTSD episodes that I could see through the window. Um, and the only way to like get to that window again, I think, is through embracing experiences that might really hurt. But they'll always tell you something about yourself, I guess, in relationships. This is not answering the question that I was going to talk about, which was like navigating healthy relationships after abuse. But I think that there's something to be said about this, like when it comes to relationships after like having a relationship where you had no agency in the relationship anymore. And you essentially became just a product of someone's abusive conditioning. It's a really terrifying position to be in. And then when you're out of that situation, it's really disorienting to feel like you have no sense of self anymore and having no clue who that was, or not knowing if what they told you you were or told you you are is true. And that's really scary because people like this will tell you really terrible things about yourself and they're not true. The things an abusive person tells you about yourself, they are not true. I swear to you, these are not true. They do not define you. The moments that you are responding to abuse, no matter what it looked like, is not you. That does not define you. That is you being pushed to your limits, just trying to survive. And that is a reflection of someone else's abuse. It is not you. No matter how much it can feel like you and you can feel guilty for becoming something else in that relationship or becoming something you didn't like, it's not you. You did not become anything. You should just be proud of yourself for getting through an abusive situation and for surviving in whatever way you could. And you did not become anything because of it. And that is not who you are. It doesn't represent who you are. It just represents their abuse being personified, that the impact of their abuse being personified in a person. And it's so fucked up that you were the person that was being used as the way to personify this abuse, the pain. It's not who you are. It's a reflection of how fucking awful they are to make somebody feel so insane that they're losing it that way, lose their sense of control and agency. It's terrifying. But yeah, I don't know how much sense this makes. I think I'll rewatch this and then decide if I'm even gonna post it. But yeah, I don't know. Okay, I don't know if I have anything else to say other than I guess if you've experienced this, like if you've been in an abusive situation and you feel like you've lost a sense of self, like I promise you that you will not feel lost forever, that like who you are will come back to you and that you never lost that. Like who you are was never lost and who you will be will also keep how would I word this? Who you will become might look different than who you used to be, but like that person is still with you. They were not lost. That person did not get to steal that from you or like kill that part of you, even though it might feel like it. It might feel like who you used to be is dead. They don't get to do that. They don't get to take away who you are or steal who you are, or they don't get to do that, and they never will be able to do that. And whoever you become in the future and whoever you are now, like you will never lose who you have been. And if there are parts of yourself that you want to lose that you've been, that's okay. Like you can let them go, but somebody doesn't get to steal them from you, no matter how much it might feel like they've ripped everything away from you. It's still inside of you, and you will always find a way back to yourself. And I guess the benefit of being alive is the fact that like we continuously every day, no matter what we're doing, continue to experience things. big or small. Like we build up daily experiences day by day, and that will always bring you one step closer to really developing a sense of self and figuring out who you are, because through experiences you experience yourself. So you will always come back to yourself, and you are never lost. And even if you feel like you've lost yourself and whoever you were is gone, they're not. They're here and they're waiting for you, and to bring whatever parts of them you want with them. You're still here, like holding your hand on this side. And then the person you want to become, or that you will become, and that you're on your way to become, they will get to decide which parts of them they want to bring with them and keep holding the hand of. But they're not gone. They will never be gone. That person does not get to take them from you, and they never will be able to. And yeah, you will always come back to yourself. And the really, it sucks that this is true, because pain is still pain, but it is through bad experiences that we can often come to appreciate good things even more, right? And so I think that can mean like the things that you love and the things that make you feel good and that make you feel happy. I think that happiness and that feeling good and that love for them will feel magnified, because you will know what it feels like to feel the opposite of that pain and that loss. And that, I guess, is something that comes from experiencing the side effects of deprivation of love or being hurt by a person, is really coming to appreciate good and love in a way that you couldn't if you didn't have that experience. And that's just one thing, as awful as it is to carry the pain. Like, something that gives me a sense of hope is knowing that maybe that'll be the reason that love feels a million times better down the line. And there's something wonderful in knowing that love will feel even better than it ever could before. Like, the things that I love making me even happier, because I know what it felt like to have something hurt me so significantly. And that's a beautiful thing, just to know that like this thing will make me infinitely happier in a way that I never could have even imagined before. And that's, there's a gift to that, I guess. But again, pain is pain. And if you've experienced this, I'm so sorry. And I'm so sorry. Like, it breaks my heart to think that anyone watching this is experiencing that sense of loss and pain right now. It actually makes me feel a little bit nauseous, because I just remember like breaking down on my floor on my birthday like 2 years ago and just feeling so beyond hopeless. And if there's one thing I could ever say, is that hope is never lost. And even if you feel like you've lost it, like, it will always come back to you. But I guess it's not that it'll always come back to you, it's that it's never left you. Like, hope for who you are, for the future, for all that you are and all that you will be, that hope has never been lost. It is still right beside you. It's just like getting to a point where you can see it again, and you can feel it. Like, I swear it is still in your hands, it is still in your palms. It's just getting to the point where you'll be able to have sensation back in your palms, and you'll feel it, but it's there. This probably sounds really dramatic, but I just remember that feeling of being hopeless so vividly, and it's just, God, just that memory. So I'm so sorry if you're experiencing that pain, but I promise you will always come back to yourself, and that pain will not come with you forever. It will not follow you forever. Yeah, I guess that's all that I'll talk about. I'll say at the end of this, I don't remember what I used to say at the end of my videos, but I have a website. If you want to go on there, I write things on there. I've written some things recently, and you can also send submissions. Anything, literally any kind of art medium, any kind of medium. If you want to send, just have a reason to talk about something, I would be honored to read it or to see it. If you just want a reason to talk about it, this is your reason. And I make videos. I make TikTok videos. I make a lot on there, and that's like what instigated this video, was like the messages I got on there. So if I'll put that also in the description, or in the little box below if you want to watch those. I make like 10-minute videos on there. But yeah, thank you for watching this, and yeah, okay, I hope you have a good day. Bye.